The Switch is selling like hotcakes, so it's only natural for every company ever to port every video game under the sun to it. And while that gives us great ports that seemingly push the boundaries of what the console's capable of, it also means we have the privilege of being flooded by a bunch of shovelware that no one asked for. There's plenty of great games for the Nintendo Switch, but while the sea of quality titles is vast, there's plenty of garbage floating around as well. While these games I'm about to talk about aren't all exclusive to the Switch, the Switch ports usually run the worst out of all of them, so I guess that's a console-exclusive feature. So let's look at a few hot, steamy piles of trash that the Switch's library has to offer. So I've heard from a few people that Troll and I is a pretty bad game, and apparently the Switch is home to the worst version of an already not good game. You'll see soon enough that this is pretty much the theme to this video, but I'll start off by quickly addressing that this game looks and runs very, very poorly. The frame rate drops constantly, especially during combat, and overall everything is very blocky and low poly looking. There's so many parts of this game that just slow down to the point where it becomes a mess. But let's for a second explain what this game is about. So the story starts off in 1953 with this rich dude calling some hitman to find and capture this creature referenced in a newspaper, dead or alive. He initially declines and thinks it's some kind of joke, but then has a change of heart once he's offered a nice fat sack of cash. Immediately following this interaction, the game cuts to 5 years later in some mountain village of Scandinavia. The scene opens up with our protagonist, a boy named Otto, or as I like to call him, running into his mother, who just got back from foraging. He warns her, or rather scolds her, not to go into the mountains alone, but then proceeds to tell her he's about to do so himself, to hunt for meat. And then she's like, "You're gonna go out there alone?" And he's like, "I can take care of myself, Mom!" So I'll save you a long, drawn-out explanation of the beginning of this game, because as soon as we're able to control Otto, the game then proceeds to waste about 10 to 20 minutes of your time learning how to hunt boar, which is incredibly boring. This part of the game is really just a tutorial that teaches you how to use weapons and craft. It's a slog and makes 10 minutes go by like an hour, but it doesn't show this game's true terrible colors. That part's coming up soon enough. So after you hunt the boar, Otto hears an explosion coming from his village and immediately runs home. He finds his mom and tries to save her, but despite the fact that he was just crafting spears out of sticks and hunting wild animals, he can't seem to figure out how to hop over a fallen tree that's about as high as his chest. He then tries to find a way around, and on his way, he runs into the troll, a giant, disgusting monster with dreadlocks. He poops his pants because he's like, "What the fuck is that?" And he runs away, and now comes the first indication that this game might not have been handled with the most care. This part is immediately infuriating. It's a very short segment, but the game doesn't let you make sharp enough turns to be able to beat this first try. I'm sure there's plenty of people who did, but from what I experienced, most people will have to learn by trial and error and knowing in advance how early to change directions. Anyway, once you get past that part, we're introduced to the game's main disposable enemy. These horrifyingly disgusting goblin-looking things. Otto straight up just stabs it to death and asks no questions at all. He's all focused on the wooden dowel he took from it, and yet is not at all concerned about what the fuck the thing is that just attacked him. Well, soon after that, we get attacked by a bunch of them, and out comes the troll to save the day. He rescues us, and then Otto teams up with him, as prophesized by the title, thereby doubling the playable characters and halving the overall enjoyability of the game. From here on out, this game is exactly twice as bad. We started off boring, but now we're gonna get into just straight up frustrating territory. Basically, what this game turns into is a puzzle platformer adventure game of sorts, with some combat sprinkled in. When it comes to the combat, there's almost no reason to ever fight with Otto unless the troll isn't present, because the troll can just straight up step on enemies, literally squishing them to death. As far as the puzzles go, you pretty much just have to use the troll to help Otto proceed in situations where he can't advance on his own. For example, the first puzzle has you grabbing an airplane wing as the troll to create a makeshift bridge to help Otto cross gaps that are too wide to jump across. None of this is fun. Everything in this game is just slow, and I don't mean just how the characters move. It seems like they take every opportunity possible to pad out the time it takes to do anything. Like, every single time you pick up the airplane wing, it plays the same unskippable cutscene. At first it's tolerable, but once you've done it a few times, you just want to pick up the stupid wing and get across whatever gap you're trying to clear. Like this spot, for example. This didn't need to be here. This isn't a puzzle. It's a bunch of gaps in a row that you can't clear all at once. So instead, you need to watch the cutscene, place the platform, move, watch the cutscene, place the platform, move, rinse and repeat. Puzzles are supposed to ask you to use your brain, not your time. Anyway, there's really nothing engaging or even remotely enjoyable about this game, and its constant frame rate drops don't do it any favors either, which in and of itself doesn't even make sense because, let's be honest, this looks like a PS2 game. Here is one of the most infamous games on the console thus far. I'm not at all the first person to talk about this game, and to be honest, hopefully I'm the last because this game needs to be quietly smothered with a pillow. Despite what this wrestling fan sign says, this is not in any way, shape, or form awesome. The only thing I'm in awe of is how a company actually released this. So this game was totally broken at launch, and now that it's been out for a pretty long time at this point, there's been a few pretty large patches that ultimately fixed absolutely nothing outside of making the horrendous load time slightly quicker, by like 10%. Now, I haven't played a wrestling game since like the N64, so I can't say I'm super educated on the genre, but this is just straight up not playable. Pretty much the only manageable thing in the game is the one-on-one matches, and even then, the gameplay is super slow and every single input feels laggy. Each wrestler's intro cutscene lasts about 10,000 years because they run at like 6 frames a second, but not from drop frames or anything, it just straight up runs in slow motion. This is ridiculous enough before the one-on-one matches, but start up a 6-man Hell in a Cell match and holy shit. I skipped 3 cutscenes and it still took 3 minutes before the match started, and that's not even counting the entire 60 seconds it took to load in between the player select screen and the pre-match cutscenes. It's like they're doing everything they can to stop you from actually playing the game. You're like, oh, let's play a match. No, here, watch cutscene. No, just watch. Shh, don't. No. You don't have to play. Just cutscene. Don't, please don't play it. Please don't play it. We didn't finish it. Speaking of the 6-man Hell in a Cell match, can you figure out what's even going on here? Because I sure can't. It's basically impossible to control your character at all because the game just can't handle everything that's going on screen. I swear there's like a full second of input lag. It's insane. And the only thing worse than a 6-man match is the backstage brawl. Now, while slow and clunky just like the rest, this one has its very own exclusive issue. See, in the backstage brawl, instead of being confined to a ring, you're in a small explorable area with different rooms and hallways. Now, this wouldn't be a problem if not for one thing. Because it's not confined to a ring, the idea is to have the match move around throughout the entirety of the backstage pseudo arena, which means you can separate from your opponent, which means the camera now either has to focus on just player 1 or split the screen to focus on both players. It does the latter. Now, this makes sense considering that's what would inevitably have to happen if you played with a friend, but here's the issue. The game is so poorly optimized that the Switch can't properly process both things at once. It's like it's now having to render 2 different matches at once, and I feel like that honestly has to be what's going on here because it drops down to like 5 frames a second, which makes this quite frankly embarrassing to watch, knowing that during development someone had to actually give this game mode the okay and be like, okay, yeah, this part's all finished. This game is a totally broken mess, and it's baffling that a AAA developer really released this unplayable garbage. And I know it's a reviewer trope, the whole like, this game's a mess, it's unplayable, but no, this is not, it's not playable. It's the game, you can't play it. I don't know how that they put this on the store at the place. So now we're on to the only Switch exclusive game of the bunch, and it's your typical run-of-the-mill, family-friendly party game that doesn't realize it's not 2006 anymore. They really don't try, do they? Just look at the icon for it on the Switch's dashboard. Legitimately looks like they just made it in about 4 minutes in Photoshop. Ever since the Wii, companies have been shitting out games like this every chance they get, and I'm assuming someone must buy them because they just keep on making them. I mean, this isn't some random no-name developer or publisher. Ubisoft did this. Honestly, who actually buys this crap? Me buys this crap. So if you couldn't tell by the name, this is yet another collection of sports mini-games. We have golf, beach tennis, basketball, skateboarding, frisbee, and jet ski. Now, this isn't one of these games that's just outwardly offensively bad, but the overall lack of quality and lack of content is what makes a game like this a big fat waste of money. This isn't a bad game because it's a broken mess, it's a bad game because it's $40. So I'm gonna start off by saying the golf portion is the only one that's kind of enjoyable. It's your standard garden variety golf game. The only real problem I have with it is, well, 2 things. The game starts you off in a practice swing position each time, so you have to press a button to approach the ball before you swing, leading to wasted time. This isn't game-breaking, but it's pretty annoying when you try to swing and then realize you didn't hit the ball. In my opinion, this should have been reversed and had a toggle for practice swings. The other annoyance is how the game actually registers swings. The meter goes up and you immediately have to press the button when it reaches the right spot to determine the power of your swing. Once again, this isn't game-breaking, but if you're used to other golf games, this is definitely against the norm and takes some getting used to. It's one thing if they want to innovate, but this is just changing up a tested and working formula just to make it different. It's not perfect, but I'm pretty sure the only effort that went into this entire title went into this vanilla golf portion, because the rest of the game is pretty piss poor. Beach tennis is just like regular tennis, only you're on a beach. This game takes quite literally no effort to play. The only thing you need to do is press the button to swing at the right time. You don't need to move around, and you don't even need to use the power swing special that they give you. In the controls, it tells you to use the control stick to aim, but as far as I can tell, I had no reason to even try. You can win matches by simply pressing the A button over and over. Great game. Also, I forgot to mention, whenever you win matches or anything in Sports Party, you get awarded with new clothes or accessories you can use. I don't think this shirt's gonna fit my character very well, though. So then we have basketball. Ever played literally any basketball video game? Well, then you've played this. Next up is skateboarding. The name is a little misleading because I thought it would have been like a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater kind of street skateboarding deal, but no, this is longboarding. No one calls this skateboarding. It's a downhill longboarding race that's a pain in the ass to control, and there's only 3 tracks. The game tells you can kick to accelerate, but after the beginning of the race, there's really no reason to because there's boost pads littered throughout each course. There's really just nothing here. It's cumbersome to control, and the tracks are all pretty straightforward with a few shortcuts that you really have no reason to ever utilize because they barely give you a leg up on the other racers. Then there's Frisbee. This whole minigame is straight garbage. The whole idea of the game is to throw Frisbees to the designated targets while also hitting some of the bonus point balloons if you can. I couldn't. The normal targets aren't all that hard to hit, but the balloons are another story. With the normal targets, the game at least gives you a little meter showing you how far you'll toss the Frisbee, but you have to use the D-pad to adjust the height of your throw, and that's what determines whether or not you'll hit a balloon. And I really couldn't even hit one of them. Not once. There's absolutely nothing the game gives you that actually shows you the arc of your throw relative to the height of the balloons, so I don't know how they expect you to hit them. This whole minigame is just very sloppy and probably the worst part of the game, but we still have one more to go. Jet ski is basically wave race, but not fun. You can accelerate, steer, and boost. Collecting these little blue lightning bolts adds to your boost meter, which you can then use. It's really just a difficult to steer jet ski racing game. If you're used to something like Wave Race's immersive movement, the way you can carve into water and everything, it's immediately apparent how stiff this game feels. Wave Race succeeded in making a game that feels like you're actually racing in water. This, however, just feels like they took a bad kart racer and made the ground look like water. Now, I know this game is very obviously made for kids, but it's still a big ol' hunk of crap. I don't care if something is marketed to children, that doesn't at all mean the game needs to be bad. You tell me right now why a game about raising your own horse and sprucing up an old stable couldn't have been made engaging and fun. It sounds like a fucking blast. Instead, we have this bullshit that looks like it was slapped together with cheaply purchased assets and royalty-free music. I'm not sure who the woman on the box is supposed to be because the cover doesn't at all represent what's actually in the game. Every last thing in this game is devoid of effort and just screams cash grab, even down to the walking and running animations. What even is this? Also, the game has tank controls? Like, I don't even mean when riding a horse, I mean the human player character has fucking tank controls. What is this, Resident Equine? This becomes even more of an issue because while you can walk around just fine with the D-pad, movement is slow and you can only run if you use the analog stick. Well, couple that with the tank controls and you've got a frustrating mess. I constantly needed to switch between both control options because if I used the D-pad, walking around took forever, and if I used the control stick, it would randomly dash in wrong inputs when I'd try to do anything but run in a straight line. There's so many parts in this where I really just sat and wondered if anyone at all put any thought into the development of this game. Like this one part where you're riding your horse out in the field. What is this? Where does one find gigantic leaves like this unless you're in the fucking rainforest? It may seem nitpicky, but stuff like that makes absolutely no sense and just further supports the idea that they just purchased random assets somewhere and mashed them together. I mean, that's the only explanation I can think of. Why would someone make that asset for this game? That doesn't make sense. Also, there's a loading screen for every single thing in this game. Heaven forbid you accidentally leave an area, you'll have to wait for the game to load just to turn around and wait for another loading screen to re-enter. And trust me, you'll want to avoid that at all costs, lest you stare at the basic-ass loading screen for more time than you're already required to. Look, I know that a kid's game doesn't need to be super involved and can lean on the basic side and still be fun, but stuff like this is just shameful, and I honestly can't see how even a little kid can get any enjoyment out of something like this, let alone why a parent would spend $30 on it, especially when almost every kid now has an iPad where they can download a bunch of games for free that are about 100 times more entertaining. And sure, not every parent can afford an iPad for their kid, but we're already talking about a Switch and buying games for it, so that's not even part of the argument. If I had a kid, I'd sooner give them a ball and a cup with a string attached to it before I'd ever be caught dead wasting hard-earned money on garbage like this, and I can pretty much guarantee they'd get far more enjoyment out of it. Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, maybe check out one of the other videos I have on the screen right there. And if you want to see more, subscribe so I pop up in your subscription feed. You probably have to click the bell though, because that doesn't always work now. And if you want to help me eat food, my Patreon link is right there too.